We're going to go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Brett Knight, and I'm here with...
I'm Bridget Veronic.
And we are going to be talking about procrastination busters today. We're going to be talking about overcoming that word, maybe the fact that you've said you're procrastinating before on starting a new exercise plan or eating a little bit differently or stopping smoking or whatever it may be. You just, I procrastinate. I'm just that procrastinator. We're going to kind of talk about that today. The outline you can see right up on your screen right now is we're going to talk about, are you actually procrastinating, or is it something else? We're going to talk about recognizing barriers that might be in your way. We're going to talk about recognizing cues and patterns, so how maybe cues turn into patterns that we do in our lives. And then the title of the webinar, they're difficult to change, right? Those behaviors?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And we're going to talk about maybe relapse, things that have happened, maybe things that cause you to relapse when you're trying to change those behaviors. So let's get started. What does procrastination mean to you, Bridget?
Basically, for me, I usually do something else in favor of whatever I wanted to accomplish. So, for example, I've been really needing to weed my garden, and instead of weeding my garden, I've been going around my house and finding pretty much every other thing to do. So for me, it just means putting it off in favor of something else.
Interesting. To me, it means maybe carrying out less urgent tasks at the point in time when I know I have more urgent ones coming up, but I'm like, I don't really feel like getting to those urgent tasks, so what's Twitter doing today? Like maybe I can read some research on procrastination or something. So it kind of means putting off something for a while, but eventually getting it done. Right? Maybe in college or, a work project that I have. I procrastinated on it, but it gets done.
Right.
But how many times have we said, I don't exercise because I'm just a procrastinator, and that's why it doesn't get done? You've heard that before, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. Personal exercise sessions I've done, they say, now, Brett, before we talk about activity, I want to tell you I'm a procrastinator. And I say, okay, that doesn't mean you can't exercise. So,
exactly.
I read something really interesting today, and Bridget and I were talking about this before we started, and it is rare that you procrastinate something that you very much value. So if you really have a lot of value in something, you don't really procrastinate at that certain task. And I really thought that is true. If I really enjoy something, I don't usually put it off. I'm usually in doing it, understanding how to do it. So why do we procrastinate with our health? What do you think?
I think sometimes people don't know where to begin with their health, perhaps, so it's something that can kind of hold them up, or
Sure.
They term as procrastination, if you will. I think a lot of times it's just overwhelming. It's difficult to know where to begin. I mean, we live in an age where there's so much information at a click of a button, and there's a lot of contradicting information out there, and it can really be confusing.
The other day I told someone in a personalized exercise session about interval training. They went out, read something else about interval training, and they were like, well, this doesn't say what you said.
Right.
So there's so much out there. Now, is that why we procrastinate, or is that something else? What do you think?
I think really it's something else.
And this is where, obviously, I let her into this, but this is where we see those barriers in our life. Instead of procrastinating something and we're saying, oh, I don't exercise, and I'll do it next week or I'll do it next month, something stands in our way. And we often hear time constraint.
Definitely.
I get out of work and
my schedule's too busy. Everybody has busy lives. You have kids. You got to take them to practice or make dinner, clean the house. I mean, there's a lot of things that we try and cram into a day.
And those don't go away.
No.
It's not like, oh, after a week everything's good and now I can get back on to what I was procrastinating on. So we can't really use that word, procrastination. And as this whole kind of theme of the webinar that we've been doing, we're trying to overcome some of that language that people use in order to, make almost excuses for why we don't do things.
Right. So we want to break this down and show you what is behind the word procrastination and what you can do about it.
Lack of support, another one. We talked about time, but also lack of support. Maybe I don't have someone that is supporting me on an exercise change or an eating habit change or whatever it may be. We talked about SMART goals last week. We'll talk a little bit about them this week. Maybe I don't have someone helping me set those goals up. intimidated. We always talk about this. Bridget talked about a fitness center and someone going in and saying, who are all these people exercising and how do I even get started?
Right. Sometimes we're not sure. I mean, as Brett was saying, in a fitness center, there's multiple things that can be intimidating about walking in. Just walking in and seeing other people exercising can be intimidating. Or if you aren't sure how to use equipment, that's very intimidating. Other things that,
Yeah. Well, and this is a great time. John introduced some polls last week, and we actually added a couple in here, and we think this is a great time to put in a poll to kind of ask you, what are your barriers? What has stood in your way in the past or now that you're saying, well, I am one of those people that says I procrastinate on things. Maybe it is a barrier that's standing in my way. What is a barrier that stood in your way to changing something that you wanted to change? So I'm going to launch a poll for you here, and we'll go ahead and let people answer that, kind of just like you did last week, and we'll give you a couple of minutes to do that, and then we'll go ahead and share that with you afterwards. Very good. Still got some people answering in. We'll give it a couple more seconds before I turn it off here. All right. Close it out here, and I will then share those results with you. And if you look at the results that are on your screen right now, most of us say busy schedule, which I'm not surprised.
Right.
In this day and age, we are busy, busy people. We have either, kids to take care of or work to do, or I got to go here and I got to go there. And the last thing that I want to think about is exercise or more work or doing something that, again, may be healthy for me in the future, but I don't have time for that right now.
Right.
Just this morning, I was talking to someone across the cubicle from me, and she was like, I was on vacation last week. I got to run. It was great. Man, it's so much easier to do it when I don't have to come to work every day. But I think, and Bridget just pointed out, what did you just point out that you found interesting here, Bridget, with this poll?
I think it's really interesting that we only had 2% that were unsure of the first step regarding their health. It seems to me that when we do some one-on-one coaching, there's a lot more people that are unsure about that first step. So maybe really, trying to figure out where our starting points should be, and are we being honest with ourselves? Do we really know where we should be starting?
Exactly, and I take that as the 2% of saying unsure, it's so low because we have heard that information.
Mm-hmm.
I know I'm supposed to probably eat a little better, and I should exercise, and all these things, but it's overcoming that, well, what degree am I supposed to do that to?
Right.
Or what's the best use of my time, again, with busy schedule or whatever it means. These are all barriers that you need to think of and maybe meet one-on-one with someone. Take advantage of a personalized exercise session or a nutrition consult. They don't just have to be scheduled through rewards. They can be scheduled at any time with any of our people here. The unmotivated, that's something that John talked about last week. John and Bethany talked about. We put that in there. I'm not surprised to see a lot of people saying that as well. We're going to talk about that when we get to our SMART goals recap here of maybe you're not specifically picking something that you value. Again,
right.
Getting back to, if I value it, I probably don't put it off. I don't procrastinate on that thing. So thank you so much for sharing with that poll. That was great. The next thing we want to talk about are, okay, I know some of my barriers. How are those developed, or how are those patterns or barriers developed? And Bridget really helped with this slide, saying that it would be great to know, okay, my cues, I do certain things,
right.
and they lead into other things, right? So
the problem is it can be really difficult to identify those cues. I mean, we're not aware of them sometimes. And, we don't always think about where a behavior comes from, why when we walk in the door. One of the ones that Brett wrote down, when we watch TV and we have a late night snack, we're not always aware of that or aware of our need to do that and continue that behavior.
Or it's just so commonplace now
right.
that, I do. Every time I watch my favorite show, I'm eating something.
Right.
Is that leading to snacking too much or whatever that, may be, or that's creating the barrier of, now I don't eat as healthy as I would like to. Or like Bridget was saying, when I walk in the door, the first thing I want to do is sit on the couch.
Right.
My couch is pretty dang comfortable. But I know that that can lead to a pattern of inactivity. You know, I'm tired when I get home from work. Last thing I want to do when I'm already on the couch is get up and put my exercise clothes on and go work out.
Right,
So.
and these patterns are difficult to push yourself out of once you're in them because they occur without thought, and it takes a lot of thought and a lot of effort to move past those and try something else and implement a new cue or a new behavior.
So sometimes just looking at those cues and saying, instead of changing this huge pattern or this huge or overcoming this huge barrier, what is the cue that got me there in the first place? Mm-hmm. And what am I always doing? Maybe correlating some of those things together. I think that can really help with determining what is actually going on here.
Right.
So that kind of leads into where we were talking about last week with motivation, the intrinsic drive versus intrinsic. How am I versus extrinsic? How am I motivated to do these things? And some people say, you're just more intrinsically driven to be healthy. Like,
right.
I just wish I had that intrinsic drive that you have.
Right.
Well, we learned last week with the poll that when we both saw that poll,
mm-hmm.
not everyone is intrinsically driven,
right.
but yet they still do well, right, Bridget?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You know, so there's a lot of things driving that behavior, and one of them is self-efficacy. And self-efficacy is like self-confidence. It's like your goals. It changes constantly. It's not just something that you have. It's something that you cultivate.
Yeah, and Bridget, when Bridget and I were discussing this slide, she definitely likes pulling apart that self-efficacy and confidence, right?
Right.
One being more specific than the other.
Right. Confidence, you know, when we talk about self-confidence, we're usually applying it to a large or broad topic. But when we talk about self-efficacy, it's talking about a specific behavior. Now, how confident am I that I can get off work and go to the gym and complete a workout? You know, something simple like that. And it's really interesting. Self-efficacy is one of those topics that I really enjoy. And I found a study that I'd like to share with you now. And basically, just to prove the point or drive home the point that self-efficacy changes with very little effort, it was a group of people that were exercising with a trainer for 1 month, and they measured their beginning levels of self-efficacy and their ending, and by the end it had skyrocketed. So then they left those people with their exercise schedules and you know, the behaviors that they had learned for 9 months and checked on them again. All of their self-efficacy had plummeted back to their starting levels, but with one training session, just one session with the trainer, it was back up to the values after the study was completed. So it's just really interesting how that one time can boost your confidence and your efficacy and your mood so that you repeat the behavior. That's all it takes is just one time.
I think that's interesting because we often talk about accountability.
Mm-hmm.
And we often kind of drive that practicing the behavior and then having someone watch me practice that behavior or
right.
hold me accountable for that.
Right.
And that's what that training session's doing.
Mm-hmm.
One time, and then that person's motivated to go back and say, oh, I can do this.
Exactly.
I can achieve this.
Right. You give yourself the I can. I know I can do this.
And in learning from, you know, we also say how is self-efficacy created here. Again, we just talked about practicing that behavior. But again, going back to those things we always talk about, planning and tracking, mm-hmm. learning from past experiences, whether positive or negative. Oh, sorry, guys. We have been showing those poll results for a long time. We're on self-efficacy here. I'm sorry about that. We were showing the wrong slide there for a while. A little technical error Bridget pointed out to me. Again, talking about that intrinsic drive, talking about practicing, excuse me, practicing the behavior in order to help self-efficacy and then gain overall confidence towards many things. Mm-hmm. I do like how we pull that apart and we right. say it's kind of two different things here.
Right.
And then big time, asking for support. Mm-hmm. Again, that person, that study you just said, that person had that personal training person there. They asked for that
right.
support.
Right.
Maybe it's every 6 months you schedule a personalized exercise session with one of us, and it's like, hey, I just needed to catch up on what was going on.
Right. Or it could be something as simple as, you know, asking a friend to go for a walk
yes.
with you. It doesn't have to be, you know, a huge planned event. It can be just a very simple, everyday sort of thing.
Sure. So we wanted to recap on SMART goals that we talked about last week. John and Bethany spent tons of time on preparing your goals, setting them up. We want to revisit those often. Mm-hmm. They're going to change. They're going to change from time to time. And for me, the most important part of the SMART goal, I don't know about Bridget, and we can have this little discussion here, is it needs to be specific. I mean, measurable is important. I need to know that it's helping me change. But if I'm just being broad about it, and, hey, I'm going to eat healthier today, that doesn't mean anything to me. I need to know, because I'm more of a self-efficacy person, I need to know that I can do this specific thing.
Right.
I can really key into, I'm going to eat more vegetables this week. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But I know that that's specific, and I'm really going to try on that this week.
Right. And one of the things that I thought about when I was looking over the presentation was that, choosing a good SMART goal is kind of like driving to a place that you've never driven to before. You have to have directions. And part of what SMART goals do is they give you that direction so you can, have landmarks with like the specific of, do like landmarks when you're driving. You say, okay, I passed this city. And like what Brett was saying, if you have a specific goal, you're like, okay, well, I ate 3 cups of vegetables this week. So you know that you're making progress. You know that you're getting there, and you know what your end destination is.
That's a great way to put it. I like that. I'm going to steal that from you.
And my favorite part, actually, of the SMART goals is the attainable part. I think that it's really important that they are attainable and true to yourself. One of the things we talked about before we began this is if you don't like what you're doing, you're not going to continue doing it. And there's a lot of great ways to get to your goals, but you have to choose a way that you're going to enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm exercising for the wrong reasons, my doctor told me to, or the CDC told me that it was a good idea.
Right.
Or even just, I want to fend off heart disease, but I'm 30 years old and I don't even know if I'll get heart disease. I'm not maybe exercising for the right reasons at that point in time.
Right.
Again, we change our goals, we change different things and values all the time, but attainable is a great thing. What's attainable for me right now?
Right, and what Brett was saying too is, if you are exercising, if that is something that is truly motivating to you, but you hate weight training, then don't weight train.
Yep.
You find another form of exercise that you really enjoy. Some people find it much easier to do if they're part of a class.
Sure.
So it's about having the values where your goals are related, and then also finding out what works for you.
And knowing that you may, if you don't like weight training right now, going back to Bridget's example, you might not always dislike it. Mm-hmm. Again, revisit these goals often. Don't just say, hey, I made it to being a healthier person, I have no more goals. That doesn't happen. The idea of doing research on how to be a healthier person, reading articles, subscribing to different things that may give you good ideas or inspiring quotes, whatever helps you overcome those barriers is what helps build that self-efficacy, which helps build that confidence. You try things, you fail, you get up, you try again.
Right.
That's what this is all about. So you're going through all this. You're making goals. You're doing all these change of behaviors. And I'm not procrastinating. I'm just breaking down barriers. And all of a sudden, I'm doing great for a couple weeks. And then all of a sudden, I do something I shouldn't have done. And I feel guilty about it. Or I go back to a behavior that, oh, man, I slipped back. Does that ever happen to you?
Definitely. It happens for me constantly.
I think it happened to me yesterday. Yesterday was my birthday, and we'll talk about occasions. And yesterday it's like, oh, I can have 2 cookies at Subway when I normally don't do that. Oh, yeah, we'll do that. Oh, will that turn into something today? Who knows? But relapse, lapse, that stuff happens.
Yeah.
Have you read the research on multitasking, Bridget?
I have not.
You haven't. Okay. Research, and I've talked a lot with John about this, research shows that we're not all that good at multitasking, even though we tend to think we are. I'm holding my iPhone right now, and while I'm talking to you, I think that I'm pretty good at typing in the code and looking at my text message. But you know what? I might not be as good at multitasking as I think I am.
Right.
Well, the thing is why would we do that with so many different goals? Mm-hmm. Why would I try to change 10 different goals at once if we know I'm not all that good at putting different things together that way?
Right.
Instead of focusing on maybe 1 or 2 things that I know will help me in that short run, once I develop those patterns, then coming to new stuff.
Right, definitely.
your world is perfectly organized right now to keep doing the behavior that you're doing. Behavior change is hard. That's the whole idea behind this whole webinar. You may have the education for this. You may understand what's going on, but changing that behavior is really, really tough. Do you have anything else to say with that, Bridget?
No,
I think that kind of sums it up.
I agree. And when we start talking about lapse, relapse, and collapse here, like Brett was saying yesterday, we had his cookies at Subway, and it's something that he doesn't usually do. We would call that a lapse. But, if Brett goes to Subway again today and gets 2 more cookies and does it the rest of the week, we'd start to call that a relapse. And then say at the end of the week, Brett's feeling pretty guilty about it, and he just gives up on the whole thing. We call that a collapse. And how do you avoid that? I mean, what kinds of things, and how do we recognize when a lapse or a relapse is occurring? How do we prevent it?
And that's awesome, because obviously a lapse is not something I'm that scared of.
Right.
Especially if I'm your trainer or something, and you're like, yesterday I didn't do the run because of this, and this. It was kind of a lapse, and it was a special occasion.
Right.
But that can lead into those relapses. That can lead so easily into those collapses. And we want to do our second poll here. I think it's probably a good time, don't you, Bridget?
Yep.
To say, what has caused you to relapse in the past? Any behavior that you've tried to change, what's caused you to relapse? Is it that birthday or holiday or vacation, or is it the illness or injury? Is it social pressure, or have you never relapsed on anything you've ever tried? So go ahead and answer those polls. I'll try not to share them for the rest of it. I'll try to just share them for a couple of seconds, and then we'll be good with that. People still answering here. We're almost done. Leave it up for about 10 more seconds. All right. Looks like it's evening out pretty well. We'll go ahead and close that out, and we will share it with you. What's the first thing that jumps out to you, Bridget?
I see we have a few people who have never relapsed.
That's interesting. And you know what? I think it's because maybe you've done some lapses in your life, but you've never let it get to that point.
Exactly.
That's great. You're already conquering that kind of thing. Of,
right.
Hey, I know that it's okay to indulge in some stuff sometimes,
right.
or holidays are good for me. But when you relapse, that injury, illness, the top one there, I'm not surprised at that, because I'm sure a lot of people have tried to exercise,
right.
hurt themselves, or not, gone too fast or too vigorous, and then it's like, this just isn't for me. This
right.
isn't something I can do.
And it can be very frustrating. It really can.
Yep.
For things like vacation, it's to take a lapse and prevent it from becoming a relapse. One of the things that Brett and I were talking about is maybe planning a little bit. When you go on vacation, you know that you're not going to be on your perfect health behavior. We go out to eat a lot more. We're in a different environment. There's lots of, goodies to choose from. If you're going to the beach, ice cream sounds great.
My cruise, I paid for that food. I'm eating that food.
Exactly. So we have to plan for those lapses to happen. We have to, accept the fact that they will happen. We're not going to be angels on vacation when it comes to our eating or our exercising. And we have to prepare for when we come back, we may have gained a couple pounds, but we just have to be ready to get back into it and not be frustrated with that. And planning is a big part of that.
You've heard a lot, and not just from us, but from everywhere, that we do too many special occasion things right now. And this kind of relates to that, with the special occasion of relapsing into, I just always do this now, and it's just the norm. It's my behavior that I do, or it's the pattern that I follow. Again, we're trying to come back and change those patterns, make the special occasion the special occasion and not the norm.
Right, that we're indulging but not overindulging. That there is a difference between the two, and when we're doing more of an indulgence, you don't feel guilty afterwards. It's more of, when it comes to food, like a sigh of contentment.
Yes.
Whereas overindulging in something, and you feel guilty afterwards, and you feel kind of more like ugh, I'm so full. Being able to recognize the difference between the two, and if you don't currently, start to pay attention to it. Where are your limits? Yeah, I think that's, and I like the kind of across the board here. We got a lot of, and you probably maybe lapsed at more than one of these, and you're like, well, this is the one I do most of the time, or whatever it may be. So
it's helping, okay, I know that this might happen. How would I deal with this when it comes up again?
Mm-hmm.
That's the big thing we're trying to do. And the way to do that, when we have our last slide here, is avoiding those high-risk situations.
Yeah.
If I know that I am a person that lapses a lot in the social pressure of my office potlucks, then guess what? I'm not going to attend those all the time. Yes, I like the social interaction with those people, but I know I can't handle eating that food.
Right.
I need to avoid that.
Exactly.
I need, go ahead. Sorry, Bridget.
Oh, you're fine. Things like positive emotional experiences. Sometimes, we associate relapse with something negative, and I think sometimes we don't think about all of the positive emotional experiences, such as like having a baby or getting married. I mean, it can really upset our routine, and even though those are wonderful things, finding a way to overcome, the barriers that it puts in your way.
Yeah, and knowing that I want to experience those positive things.
Right.
Those are good for me,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not going to drag me down.
Right.
The holiday time when I get to eat things that I remember as a kid, that's not dragging me down. That's just part of who I am, and it doesn't have to be everyday part of who I am.
Exactly.
So, coping strategies. We work a lot with Julie, our behavioral person over here, who does a lot of focus meditation or self-coaching. Us as physical activity is one of the best ways to cope with stress, all these different things, and we've talked about that before.
Most definitely. Even if it's only getting up and walking around for, 5-10 minutes, I mean, it can totally clear your head. Just like the focus meditation, it's just taking a mental break, pushing yourself away from your computer, just relaxing for a minute, thinking of closing your eyes for a few minutes and just focusing on your breathing, just relaxing.
Yep. And it doesn't have to be something you think of as spiritual or whatever it may be. I've heard some people that, I don't do yoga, it's too spiritual for me. This is something that's just reflecting on what's going on right in that moment.
Right.
I've often told people, you're going to eat something, take 5 to 10 seconds to just think about, am I hungry? Am I eating it for a positive emotion? What's going on?
Right.
Why am I doing this? Or if you're not going to go into the gym, why am I not going into the gym? Or something like that. Just reflecting on what is actually happening. Bridget came up with this, and I'll let her read it. I love this little quote here.
Change is a process, not an event.
Yes.
We have to remember that, even when we feel that we have successfully changed a behavior, which according to the research, it takes about 6 months of practicing the behavior before a change occurs. We have to remember that if we're presented with some cues or a different situation, that we might revert back to what we used to do, and we can't beat ourselves up about it. So always remember that it's constantly changing, just like you are, just like your goals are.
Yep.
It's not going to happen all at one time.
The idea that people don't change is not a thing. If we do change, we should be ever adapting to things. We should be taking in ideas and saying, how does this help me further my healthy lifestyle? Next week, we're going to answer some questions here in just a second, but I want to let you know what's next week. Vitality is the word next week. Mm-hmm. It's putting yourself first and not feeling guilty about it. We're going to go to the questions and see if we do. We do have a couple here. One was I can't seem to see the poll, to see the slides, only the poll. Sorry about that. We did change that. Thank you. Oh, Bridget, your voice was harder to hear. So we did move. We'll try to do that next time. The barrier poll is are you serious? It's more than one of these. So, yeah, we don't really have any questions today. If you do have a question, we do have a couple minutes that you can put in. But we did acknowledge that. It is more than one of those, I think, things that I've relapsed on. It does happen. But, again, it's coming back to which one is biggest for me or which one keeps happening. Can I change that somehow? Well, let's see if anyone else has any questions. We have another minute here, but if not, we will wrap up in just a second. All right. Doesn't look like any other questions today. It is 12:30, so we thank you for being with us. Do you have anything else to add, Bridget?
No, just thank you for attending,
yes.
And we hope to see you next week at the Vitality presentation.
And yes, the PowerPoints will be available as for the recording. I had some technical difficulties the first week, so that recording didn't happen. But we will make sure to get this out to people as soon as possible. So
thank you so much.
Again, thank you so much for attending. Have a great day. It's beautiful outside. Go for a walk. We'll talk to you later.